Welcome and hello. Welcome to 2026 and the Housing Innovation Challenge 2026. I'm Terry Slavik-Siyuki. I'm the principal and chief storyteller with a company called TST Inc. I was also one of the co-founders of the America at Home study that's just completed wave four, 6,002 US consumer responses related to home and community. Our study is the only longitudinal consumer study dating back to the beginning of the pandemic that really tracks how US consumers think, feel, want to live in both homes and communities. So you're in for a treat, I hope. And that I've been asked to give you some insights around different buyer groups in America today and how they think about homes. So we're going to talk about who will live in these homes, how they want to live, and how you might, during the Housing Innovation Challenge, design a home to meet those needs. So let's dig in. So first of all, just to level set, who did we hear from? It was 6,002 responses in May and June of 2025 in wave four of our study, which represents the US Census and household formations in the country today. The insights covered all four regions and all generations in the US, profiled against what we call Kantar's mind-based consumer segmentation analysis. So what that means is generations are big groups of people, but using the Kantar mind-based analysis, we can actually dive into finer grain detail and look at an individual segment from within each of those generational segments. And so I've done that for you today. What I'm going to share with you is insights and findings about home and life today at a macro perspective, the consumer mindset, priorities and uses of space in the home, how we're using space, activities that are happening in the home, and then wellness priorities and gaps in satisfaction. Because I firmly believe if you understand who will live here and how they want to live, then as you embark upon your challenge to design a home for the target segment you're choosing on your team, you'll have a greater chance of success. So as I mentioned, we've taken each of the three core generations, Gen Z, the millennials, and then an older boomer segment. And what I've done is I've gone in and selected for you a specific mind-based segment that meets the needs of what your Housing Innovation Challenge leadership team has told me they want you to focus on. So for example, in Generation Z, that might be a buyer who's recently graduated from university, maybe setting up home for the first time, renting or owning their very first home. That's an engaged activist segment. We'll go into more detail in each of one of these segments in a moment. The millennial segment I chose for you is called the ambitious realists. Now, the name really says a lot in each of these segments. So they're ambitious, but they're also realistic. They're likely parents with kids. They're running on all cylinders, busy all the time, and have lots of different challenges in how their home can help support their lifestyle. We've selected an older boomer segment for you called the smooth sailors. And you can think about this group as a group that probably wants to age in place. So how their home works for them over time is going to be more and more important. I think one of the most important things for you to understand is who's living in these homes, right? So a quick cue for you as you go through this presentation is you can look at the color-coded key. If you're choosing the Gen Z engaged activist as your target buyer, look for the lime green. If you're choosing the millennial ambitious realist, look for the teal. If you're choosing the older boomer smooth sailor, look for the pink. So just in general, I'm not going to go into detail on every slide because I know you'll be able to get this deck and watch this presentation at length. But singles who live alone tend to be Gen Z and baby boomers. Now, if it's one or two people living in a household, how you design and think about that home, what size is it, what spaces are most important is really critical. The consumers in the US today that most likely have couples with kids are going to be your millennial segments and also some of your Gen Z. So this just gives you an overview of kind of who's living with what family and household formations based on our study last June. And then another interesting data point I think is really critical is how we're working from home today more than ever before in greater numbers. And so more than half of Gen Z and millennials and almost a quarter of the older boomers are working from home today. Now, if you're working from home and living from home, your spaces need to work harder than ever before, which is really, really critical. We asked a really important question in all four waves of the America at Home study. And so this is data, again, from wave four. We said of the hobbies and activities that you've listed, which ones are you engaging more in or less than a couple of years ago? And what I'm showing you here again is by your specific target customer segment, the things that each of them are saying they're doing more of than they were just a couple of years ago. And I think if you really focus on this, this tells you how people are using spaces in their home. So let's just start at the top and look at the millennial, or sorry, pardon me, the Gen Z. So Gen Z, you can see, are doing more of pretty much everything. So their attitudes and lifestyles have really shifted. They're cooking and baking more, they're eating together more at home, they're playing with kids more, they're exercising more at home, doing a lot of different things. Millennials, similarly, but some different nuances if you look across the data set. So in this case, this is a group that's gardening or doing more yard work at home. Eating together more at home also is really important. And then the boomers, the thing that really sort of rises to the above for me on this group is this is a group that's doing a lot more shopping online than some of the other things they've been doing in their home over the last 2 years. So again, you'll get to spend more time with the data. Just wanted to level set with how we're using our space. Another really, really important thing, I don't know if you know this, but 85% of our health outcomes today are based on the built environment. Now, that's a CDC data point. So that means that your genes are really only responsible for about 15% of your health outcomes, but 85% are based on the built environment. So that's how and where you live. Does your home have access to natural light? Do you have clean air, clean water? Are you able to walk to places? Does it encourage physical mobility? Are there places for social connection, for mental stimulation, for emotional well-being? Really, really important. So in the American Home Study, we pushed on that and really tried to ask people how important each domain of wellness is in their lives, because it's not just about physical well-being or sustainability and green building practices to help save our environment. It's really all the factors I mentioned. So this is just a really good summary chart for you to show you which areas of well-being are most important to each of your target demographics. We'll go into this in more detail by your individual segments in a moment. And then the other thing we asked, which I think is really important and hopefully insightful for you as you begin to design the home, is what are the things that consumers today say are missing in their home that they wish they had and they'd be willing to pay for? So what we're showing you here are the responses that each of your target segments ranked as very important, which means on a scale of 1 to 5, this is the top two box. So it's very important. So again, let's start with our Gen Z. Look at the off the charts. Better equipped modern kitchen for cooking. Really important. Private outdoor space or garden. Indoor outdoor dining. You look at our millennial segments. It's, expanded and better storage. Energy efficiency. Washing areas off the laundry or mudroom is interesting for that group. You look at boomers. Again, energy efficiency. Really, really top of mind for all of our consumer groups. Expanded, better designed, streamlined storage. All these things are really important. So really, again, once you pick your target customer that you're designing your home for, this will give you a good way to think about what's important to them. We also asked, what's your favorite room or space in the home? And again, I've pulled this apart for you by your target segment. So interesting differences here. So for the Gen Z engaged activists, the primary bedroom is the most important room. And it makes sense if you think about it. If this is their first home of their own, or they're moving out of university or college dorms, for example, this is really the chance for them to get to sort of put their own stamp on their own space. For the millennial segment, that's the group with kids, right? And busier than ever, the family room is their most important room. And also, interestingly enough, for the older boomer demographic, the smooth sailor, the family room is also very important to them. But don't discount the kitchen, right? We all think the kitchen's the most important room in the house. It is important, and it's definitely the heart and the hub of the home. But there's some generational nuances here that really, I think, should go to be considered as you consider designing the spaces in the homes you're creating. So then we said, well, great, if those are your favorite rooms, well, why are those your favorite rooms? And again, I'm not going to go into the detail here, but you can look at each of your groups and see some of the nuances and the differences. But in general, makes sense, right? The family room, places to gather, places to talk. It's also places to eat for some of the demographics. The design is more important to one segment over the other segments. Places to watch TV, play games, those kinds of things are really important to think about. How we use space matters. The primary bedroom, I mentioned this is kind of my space, right? It's about more than sleep. It's about a quiet, private reserve and where you can kind of get away from others and kind of have space of your own. Or even in some cases, if it's a busy millennial family, where I can go to read a book or where I can go to, catch up on my latest digital games or be on my iPad for a period of time. So again, really pay attention to the nuances for how your target population thinks about these spaces and uses these spaces versus others. I should mention too, on the left-hand side of each of these charts, where it says total, that's the total responses across all generations and all of the 6,000 respondents. Okay, so kitchen. Kitchen is for cooking, for gathering, for eating, and also the design is really important to some groups more than others. It's more important to the boomers than it is to the millennials, for example. For the millennials, it's where they gather and talk and hang out. For the Gen Z group, it's where we cook and love to cook more so than the other group. So again, just really pay attention to the nuances to how your target buyer uses the space. And then outdoor spaces, private outdoor spaces in the home. That could mean things like a balcony, a porch. It could mean things like a yard, a small yard, depending on the size of your home that you're designing and building. So these are really important to think about as well. For the Gen Z, it's about outdoor scenery and gardens more so than the other groups. For the boomer segment, it's about, backyard activities. Also for the Gen Z, it's about backyard activities. For the millennials, it's a place to relax. It's my space. Look at the bottom, second from the bottom, it's my space or a place where I can go and relax and be. We're going to dive in here to more specifics about each of the profiles that you may be designing homes for. So what I've pulled for you is information from Kantar's mind-based profiles that show you that values, attitudes, behaviors, and really the psychographic profiles and specific insights for each of these three target buyer groups. Then we're also going to talk about, again, from our American Home Study, each of these specific buyer groups' hopes and fears in the home, areas of wellness that they feel they're doing well on and others they need to improve upon. And then I pulled at the very end for you for each of the three groups, the level of priority that these groups are putting on certain areas in the home and certain spaces and technologies they'd like to see in their home, which will be really insightful as you begin to do your design work. So, Gen Z. First cue, as I said earlier, their name really means a lot. Okay, so they're called the engaged activists. They are engaged, they're very active. They believe, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner, that everyone has value and deserves a voice. What you can see is just against the US population. Now, this is a couple of years old, but the median age here is about 26, probably 27. You can see their household income, the percent that are married, the percent that are parents, and so on. More details about this particular group. They are, as I said earlier, they're facing reality. Many of you are probably in this segment, coming out of school, coming out of university for the first time, really setting up life of their own. So, interesting things about this group, the top right, the two charts on the top right-hand side. This is one of the first early adopter groups, earlier than most to adopt new things. So, the green box in this case compares them to the total US population. And then some other keynotes down below, they're all about internationalism, wanting to experience other customs and cultures. So think about that in the design of the home. That's a pretty big delta, 71% versus 43 for the overall population. They're also stretched time-wise, feeling like they're behind schedule, always busy, always on the go, looking for new experiences, also looking to hope that they can spend more time disconnected from technology. So while this is definitely a digital native population, I think we're seeing this group more than other demographics, perhaps even beginning to unplug more than ever. The broader scheme, this is a very culturally connected group. So, yeah, I encourage you to think about really getting specific about what cultures, what kind of groups are you defining and building a home for? They're culturally explorative, they're socially savvy, and they're all about giving back, volunteering time for charities and other things that are important in their personal lives. And then I love to bring in this slide about following the money. So how do each of these generations differ in terms of their relationship to money? Clearly, this group is less financially comfortable. So affordability in terms of a purchase price, but also the ongoing operating costs of a home are going to be important to them. They're less comfortable in sort of being financially prepared. Makes complete sense. They're just starting out. But look at the far right-hand stat. Very optimistic. I believe I'll become rich in my lifetime. So that's really something to strive for and to look forward to. In terms of growth, this group is really driven by purpose. I said that earlier, but this should be no surprise to you on the call, I think, today or watching this recording today. Great expectations. They're optimistic. They expect brands to play an important role in the social conversation. So the materiality, the technologies, the things you choose to put into the home that you're designing for this group, do they have a purpose? Do they have a story? If they do, how can you bring that to life and make that a unique differentiator? They're all about being much more inclusive, very experience oriented, less about things, more about experiences is actually true for this group. So let's talk about go back to our study for a moment. We asked all of the respondents to give us the top 5 things that they're worried about and hopeful for. And I like to think about this question in terms of Clayton Christensen's jobs to be done framework, if you're familiar with his work in business or marketing lexicon, if you will. So everything we do and we build and create as in our consumer economy should help kind of either mitigate the pains consumers have, which would be the fears, or amplify the gains. What are they hopeful for? So I've given you in each case of your three target groups a listing of their top five things that they're most excited about, or sorry, most worried about, and then most hopeful for. And what's important to note is the things that we're really worried about are things that maybe are less in control, personal control. The things that we're most hopeful for, like my immediate family, my friends, my job, my career, my health and wellness, my home, those are things that are more in our own individual personal control. So then I said earlier I would give you the gaps by generation in terms of wellness. So how to understand this slide is that the kind of cross-hatched slide is the number of people who said they were fully satisfied with this particular domain of wellness. And the dark green slide is, or slide bar, pardon me, is the number who said this area is very important to them. So let's look at the biggest deltas, right? So 78% of Gen Z consumers in America today say that financial well-being is very important to them, but only 33% are satisfied. That's huge. 76% say physical well-being is very important. 44% are satisfied. Also really, really huge. So for this particular buyer, the financial, the physical, and the emotional areas of well-being are really where the biggest opportunities are and the biggest deltas are. We also added a question in wave four, which I think is really exciting. And I'm going to show you when I talk about this now, this data across the entire sample size and it compared to the other two populations. So this isn't just the Gen Z data. Obviously, you can see all the colors are included here. But the question was, if you had $50,000 to spend in your home, how would you spend it? What are the top things you would spend it on? And so for the Gen Z buyer, it's the whole house water filtration system. It's energy efficiency. It's a gym and fitness space. It's a private outdoor space and private gardens. It's better equipped kitchen for cooking, but less important than it is in some of your other cases. And then the next 10 after the first top 10, declines in importance. But as you're beginning to make decisions and selections around your design of your home and the floor plan of the home you're building for this particular buyer group, these slides will really be gold and help you decide what they care most about. All right, that's our Gen Z. Let's move on to the millennial ambitious realists. And again, their name really says it all. This is a group, look at that photo. These people are time stretched. I'm on track with the plan I set for myself, and I'm proud that to others I look like I've made it. But is this all there is in life? This group is really struggling with, work and success in work. They're on a peak trajectory in their career. They also usually have, most of them have kids. Most of them are married and are parents, as I said. So this is a group that's balancing a lot. I think the term I'm in overdrive really kind of says it very well. This is a group that's ambitious. They're driven to achieve success. They think it's important in their personal and professional life. Overall well-being is very important to them as well, but they do struggle with it. Other keynotes, signs of success, being really good at your job is very, very important to this group. They do feel in control of their day, but they do stretch to kind of balance everything. Moving on to kind of the broader scheme, blocking and tackling really says it all. So things are coming at them from all angles very quickly. They're focused on protecting their health more so than all other millennials, and even more so than the total population overall. They're concerned about taking time to connect with others, to nurture those one-on-one relationships that are very important to their personal life. And they're also concerned about taking steps to protect themselves from environmental pollutants. Really key insight for you as you design their homes. So safe spaces are very important to this group. And then again, following the money, a great way to think about it because the home is the biggest financial purchase we'll make, right? So stretching their wallet is really important to them. So this group maybe feels a little bit less happy with how they stand financially in terms of being prepared for retirement against the whole overall population. But of the millennial segments, they feel a bit ahead of the curve. So that's a good thing. They have benefited from the improvements in the overall US economy over the last few years post-COVID. So that's also really good. They do have a car loan. They do have a mortgage in greater numbers than most other millennial groups and also the total population overall. So they do have those financial constraints, but they're optimistic. They're driven to success, and in their own mind, they are going to succeed. So in terms of growth, what are they looking for in the future? They're about guarding privacy. They're a smart consumer. I think they really believe that loyalty is earned, and it's something that they expect and that they respect in return. Values are very important to them, much more so than other millennials, and again, greater than the overall population as a whole. All right, so what are they most hopeful for or most worried about? Their top worries, inflation, economy and the jobs, housing cost and availability, and so on. And again, their hopes are things that they're in control of, their immediate family, their overall health and wellness, their home. You can see some differences in terms of the order of these things than what you saw a moment ago with the Gen Z. So really leaning into this is super important. And then health and wellness. Well, the biggest area of importance to them from a well-being perspective at 85% is financial well-being, but only 38% are satisfied. Big opportunity. How can you create and design a home that will be less expensive to purchase and less expensive to operate long term? Physical well-being, how do you design a home that allows for healthy indoor air, access to light, biophilic design, access to healthy foods, kitchens that work, great sleep rooms, places to work out, places to feel physically comfortable, really, really important to this group. And then again, the third, of course, being emotional well-being. So again, this is the same slide you saw a moment ago, but let's focus on the teal bar for a moment. So what are the most important things this group would spend $50,000 on if they were given the chance to do so in their home? Top of this list is a better equipped, more modern kitchen for cooking. Makes sense, right? This is a group that has kids and they're likely coupled up or co-parents. So really kitchens are not just where you eat, it's where the family spends time. And then you can see from this group, the next few are fairly even in terms of importance. Energy efficiency, water filtration, air filtration, energy production, and solar is important to this group. Private outdoor garden is important, not as important as the Gen Z, but still important. And then you've got your secondary list of things as well. All right, well, that's the millennial segment. Now, to bring us home, let's talk about the older boomer segment, the smooth sailors. This is an older boomer segment. So there are a number of boomer segments, but this is not one of the younger ones. This is the group that's probably looking to age in place. Their name also says it all. So smooth sailors, I like to think about this, ease on down the road. The road ahead is smooth and I'm on cruise control. These guys have done everything right. They're happy, they're comfortable. So how you design and create a home to support their next stage of life or their third chapter, as it may be, is really, really important. So as I said, steady as she goes, right? I'm cruising into this next stage of life. They're comfortable financially, more so than the general population. They're also less likely to be an early adopter. So new technologies you might consider designing into this home, think about why they're important. They're not important to this group just because they're new. They're important to this group if they give them some other benefits. And then you can see this group's also very, of course, concerned about sticking to a budget because they're likely on fixed income, or maybe if they're not retired, they're partially retired. They're big about proactively managing their health. It's important to them. They're, less open-minded perhaps than some of the younger generations, but, don't die on a hill on that. It's not the end of the day. They're certainly still very inclusive, I think, in most cases than some of the other groups that we've seen to work with. And then in terms of the broader scheme, again, they're more comfortable with routine, less about risk taking. They are less willing to spend. They're more willing to stick to a budget. They're looking forward to kind of doing things on their own, to really leaning into what they've created in their lives so they can kind of enjoy things, whether it's travel, whether it's, new ways of designing or sorry, experiencing and developing different food. Those sorts of things are important to them for sure as they go down the road. And then in terms of following their money, I mentioned this group is very financially set. They feel very comfortable. They're confident they made the right decisions early in life, and they're looking forward to be able to retire the way they want. But remember, their home is their biggest investment. And if this is a group that you choose to design and build a home for and they're aging in place, how do you consider all those health and wellness things going forward while still making sure you're building a home that has value that can be retained? They're all about paying monthly bills, not worried about credit cards. Most of them are retired. This is a group that the large proportion of them has a traditional pension, so they do have fixed income, but they have good, reliable quality income coming in. And then in terms of switching on growth, less digitally inclined, probably no surprise. They tend to be more avid TV viewers than other generations, and they also get a lot of their news from mainstream media. Spotify, Pandora, which is, that's crazy to even be talking about that now. Those streaming apps are really important to this group as well. So, what are their worries? You're going to see some differences here. This is a group that's less worried about the economy and jobs because they're no longer working, at least not full time, but they are concerned about inflation because every cost that goes up when they're on a fixed income, that affects them. They're also more concerned than others about political division, and that affects them really personally. But their hopes, again, are very similar. My immediate family, my overall health and wellness. This is a theme that's really important to this group. Retirement, my home, and this is a group where religion and faith rises to the top five, which it doesn't with some of the other groups. Let's talk about their health and wellness. Their biggest gaps are financial and physical. Not as big of a gap as you see in some of the younger generations, but again, financial well-being is critical to this group because they only have so many resources through which to live the balance of their life, and they're hoping to live it well. And they really are committed to their own personal health and wellness. So, whatever you can do to design a home that supports that physical wellness will be really important. And then back to our priority list. So $50,000, how would an older boomer spend their money? Kitchens, again, top of market, top of mind. But again, look at some of these health and wellness things or these new technology features, right? The whole home air filtration system is really important to this group. Energy efficiency, energy production, solar, better expanded storage. Some interesting nuances that when you look at against the overall responses in the gray bar, but also very important to look at the younger generations. And then here's your secondary list of things that are important to them as well. So, interesting things here. EV charging rose a little bit higher for this group than it did for some of the other younger groups. Lights that adjust during the time of the day, indoor outdoor dining, home automation. You may not expect that from the older boomer segment. When you look at them against some of the other populations, those rise to the top. So that's it. There's a wrap. I would say good luck. Pick a segment that interests your team the most and have fun creating a great housing solution for the future of our country. Thank you very much.